Joan Melendez Misner, and I am an Aerospace Integration Engineer working at NASA for the Launch Services Program at Kennedy Space Center in Florida. The Launch Services Program, or LSP, is responsible for launching uncrewed spacecraft to observe our Earth, other planets, and even our universe. Our most recent launch, which has been the most famous one this summer, was the Perseverance rover that is going to be exploring Mars and will be landing on the Red Planet next year. As an integration engineer, I'm responsible for the spacecraft and the launch vehicle operational requirements, the payloads, the hardware, and I also do all of the testing for the requirements, as well as integration of the spacecraft into the launch vehicle inside of the fairing. The fairing is the very top of the launch vehicle that opens up in space, and then it lets the spacecraft go into wherever it's going to head. So in the case of the Mars rover Perseverance was inside of the launch vehicle's fairing, and once it got to its trajectory and where it's supposed to go, the fairing opens up, and then the trajectory of the Mars rover is on its way to the red planet Mars. And so that's what I'm in charge of. I help guide the spacecraft, the Mars rover, and the launch vehicle and operational requirements and make sure that both of them fit together. So we want to make sure that the fairing that we choose for the spacecraft is big enough to carry the spacecraft into orbit. And so that's what an integration engineer does. It's a lot of exciting work because you get to not only be part of the operational requirements and developing those requirements, but you're also part of the testing and even get to see the encapsulation of the spacecraft inside of the fairing. It's a lot of neat stuff, and I really like what I do. It's a fun job because it allows me to work with all of the current launch providers, in this case SpaceX and ULA, as well as future launch providers like Blue Origin and Virgin Orbit. It also allows me to work with international space partners like the European Space Agency or JAXA, which is a Japanese aerospace exploration agency. So all of us have a common goal of exploring our planet or exploring other planets, and it's a lot of fun to be involved with all of them. The other fun thing about working for LSP is that I get to work on all of the scientific missions. There's one that's going to be launching on November 10th out of our Vandenberg Air Force Base, which is in California, called the Sentinel-6. The Sentinel-6 is going to be exploring the height of our ocean, which will allow us to not understand our oceans, but also understand climate change and will provide help with climate change research. I'm going to be able to go into the control room on that day, which is really exciting. Think of it like mission control. So I'll be in Florida directing a go or no-go for my specific requirements for that launch. It's really exciting, and I'm really excited for this upcoming mission on November 10th. Another mission that I will be a part of in the future is called the Europa Clipper. Europa is an icy covered moon that circles Jupiter, and scientists believe that there's a salty global ocean that has more liquid than all of the Earth's oceans combined. And it may answer a fundamental question of, are we alone? So like I said, all of the scientific missions that I'm a part of for LSP is just so cool because it's something that I am a part of, and it's bigger than what I have ever imagined. I mean, I might be a part of a rover that's going to be going all the way to Jupiter to see if there may be life on other planets. That's pretty cool. Not only do I like what I do at NASA as my day job, but I'm also a part-time science communicator. As a science communicator, I love to use my platform to encourage those who want to get into STEM fields, STEM being science, technology, engineering, and math. Personally, I love to see anybody who's involved, and anybody who wants to ask me questions about how I got my job at NASA and how I got here. I'm always willing to help and try to inspire the next generation so they can also explore the universe. Specifically, I also love to talk to women who want to get involved in STEM profession. Right now, women make about 28% of the STEM workforce, and I want that number to at least be 50% in the next decade or two. I want to encourage women and let them know that it is okay if you're not very good at science, technology, engineering, or math. I was not very good at science when I was in high school, and I even failed organic chemistry when I was in college, and I have a chemistry degree. You don't have to be the smartest person in the room to get into STEM. You just have to have the passion, and you have to have the will to keep pushing even if you fail. And that's what I love to use my platform, and that's what I want to pass on to the next generation. So as a science communicator, I love to do these things. I love talking to people like you. I love talking to the people in my community, and I love being involved. And that's what I want to talk to you about today, about the amazing women in STEM that inspired me and many others to get into the STEM careers. Maybe one day I will be able to be named as an inspirational STEM professional that got people involved in STEM. A girl can only dream. There are three specific, and that's what I want to talk to you about today. I want to talk to you about 3 groups of specific women that inspired me and have inspired many others to get into NASA, specifically STEM fields. I want to talk about the Mercury 13. I also want to talk about Katherine Johnson, and last but not least, Dr. Ellen Ochoa. First of all, let's talk about the women who inspired me to be an astronaut one day, which is the women of the Mercury 13. The Mercury 13 are 13 American women who, under a privately funded program, went through the same exact physiological test that all of the NASA astronauts went back in 1959. That's amazing. Now think about how amazing it was. In the 1960s, women were already entering the workforce thanks to World War II, when a lot of the men had to go overseas and work, and women had to step up and go into the workforce in factories and etc. But after World War II ended, women had to go back into the household because the men were back. And so the 1960s had the feminist movement of allowing women to go back into the workforce and to fight gender discrimination. And that's what these pioneers did. These women were the first ones who not only went through the psychological tests that the men and their men counterparts went through as the astronaut program started, but they were also fighting for the rights for other women in the future to be able to enter the astronaut program. Women like me. I just recently applied to be an astronaut this past year in 2020. I'm still waiting for my reply, but because of these amazing women back in the 1960s, I am able to apply to be an astronaut. Think about that. Think about how amazing that is. That not only did they go through the exact same test as the men, but they also passed and sometimes did even better than their male counterparts. As I mentioned, the 13 women passed all of their tests with flying colors and sometimes did it even better than the men, and still are a super inspiration for people like me who want to get into the astronaut program. If you want to learn more about the Mercury 13, there's some amazing books out there, but if you're not really into books, there's an awesome documentary on Netflix called The Mercury 13, and I would encourage every single one of you to check it out and be inspired just like me. The next notable woman that I want to talk about, you may have heard of thanks to an amazing movie that came out a few years ago called Hidden Figures. Hidden Figures talked about 3 amazing women at NASA back in the 1960s. And specifically who I want to talk to you about today is Katherine Johnson. Katherine Johnson was a mathematician and used geometry to help calculate space travel. They used her geometry and her math skills to help Alan Shepard go into orbit and orbit our Earth and be the first American to orbit our Earth, as well as her calculations to go to the moon. Now think about how great that was. In the 1950s, there weren't computers like we have today. They used people to solve a lot of these math equations, and then they would put those math equations or their solutions into these adding machines to make sure that the calculations were correct. But imagine how smart you had to be a quote-unquote computer back in the day to do handwritten calculations to help us not only orbit our planet but go to the moon. As a NASA employee myself, right now I'm extremely lucky because I'm using a lot of the sweat and tears and knowledge that my previous predecessors used, and I'm able to put a lot of that stuff into a software. I mean, we do some calculations by hand, but it's mainly just to make sure that the software is correct. But nowadays we use computers so much to calculate these trajectories of not only orbiting our planet, but going to Mars, the moon, Jupiter in the future. I can't imagine how smart and how brilliant these women were and these computers were back in the day when they didn't have the amount of equipment that we have now. It's amazing to think about. And that's why Katherine Johnson is one of my favorite women in STEM and one of the inspirations that I always have looked up to. And finally, the last person that I want to talk to you about today is Dr. Ellen Ochoa. She is a former astronaut, and she is the first Hispanic woman who was the director of the Johnson Space Center in Houston. As an astronaut, she logged nearly 1,000 hours in orbit, on several shuttle missions, with her first one being Shuttle 56, which is aboard Discovery. She's one of the people that I personally look up to because as a Latinx woman and someone who aspires to be an astronaut, her story is absolutely incredible. She's a former astronaut and then became the director of Johnson Space Center. She is the first woman to do so, and that is why I personally look up to her. And like I've mentioned before, as a Latinx engineer, we only make about 2.8% of the STEM profession. I want to see that number increase, and by having role models like Dr. Ellen Ochoa, it gives me hope that in the future there will be more Latinx engineers or STEM professionals working not only at NASA, but working all over the STEM field. Well, that concludes my video. I hope that you were inspired just like I was when I was growing up about these amazing women in STEM that pioneered the way for me to have a job at NASA. And I hope that one day that I inspire just one person, one woman, or one even Latinx minority to get into the STEM profession, because we need brilliant people to get us to further into space. We're going to be going to the moon in 2024, and then hopefully we'll be going to Mars right after that. But even after my generation leaves this planet, I want it to leave it into good hands for people who are as inspired about space exploration as I once was when I was reading about these amazing women. Hopefully you guys all take care, and if you want to follow me, I am at Your Female Engineer on Instagram and on TikTok, or at AstroJoni on Twitter. Take care.